house shook so hard it snapped me awake. Not thunder, not wind, something heavier. Diesel engines growled outside my bedroom window like a convoy parked on my lawn. Banjo was off the bed, nails scraping the floor, a low growl rolling in his chest. I shoved my feet into my boots, yanked the door open, and stepped onto the porch. A 7-foot trench was being carved out of the earth around my land. Headlights cut through red dust. Steel teeth bit into the soil my father and I had walked. And right in the middle of it all stood the HOA president smiling. They thought they were trapping me. They didn't know I'd been recording them for weeks. Karen Martell didn't start with bulldozers. She started with a smile. A week before the trench, she rolled up in a spotless white SUV that didn't know what a dirt road was until it met mine. She parked at the gate, eased out like she was stepping onto a stage, and walked straight toward my fence like she already owned the view. Pale blue pantsuit heels biting into my gravel clipboard in hand. She didn't look around. Didn't take in the fields, the cottonwoods, the workshop my dad and I built board by board. She just measured distance fence to house well to barn, eyes narrowing like she was lining up pieces on a board. Mr. Reed, she called, voice bright as a TV anchor. That's me, I said, staying on my side of the gate. Banjo sat at my heel, fur lifted along his spine. She extended her hand through the bars like she was doing me a favor. I'm Karen Martell, president of the Sunny Hollow Homeowners Association. I didn't take her hand, not to be rude, just because every instinct in me said don't. She recovered fast, letting her hand drop without losing that trained smile. We've sent a few letters, she said. I wanted to introduce myself personally. Sunny Hollow is expanding. Your cooperation would make this easier for everyone. That was her in a sentence, control first, courtesy second. I nodded once. I got your letters. And I burned them, I said. Her smile didn't crack, but something cold flashed behind her eyes. She looked past me at the fields, at the old boundary marker half buried in red clay, at the metal roof of my dad's workshop catching the sun. This is nice, she said, putting just enough emphasis on the word to make it an insult. But you're sitting on a lot of potential. Sunny Hollow is a planned community, shared values, cohesion. We'd like to fold this parcel into Phase 3. Phase 3 sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced saying it in a mirror. My father bought these 12 acres when I was 12, I said. Taught me how to keep a generator running and a fence standing. I rebuilt the porch myself after a tornado, took half of it in 2014, dug the well deeper when the city water turned to pennies. I'm not folding anything into anything. There it was, my whole life in one short list. Enough to tell her this land wasn't inventory. Her smile thinned. One sentence, and she knew I wasn't going to be easy. Well, she replied, sentiment is understandable, but isolation can be difficult. Most people prefer to be part of something bigger. She stepped closer and laid a business card on my fence post like she was tagging a tree to be cut. Offers only get lower when people delay, she said lightly. And out here alone, things change faster than you think, Banjo growled. She didn't flinch. She turned heels, clicking on gravel, and walked back to her SUV like the scene was already written in her favor. As she slid behind the wheel, she called over the roof. Don't worry, Evan. You'll see the bigger picture soon. She drove away slow, leaving a trail of dust and a promise hanging in the air like a storm warning. The harassment didn't start loud. It started like a mosquito buzz, small, easy to swat until there were too many to ignore. The first drone showed up 3 days after her visit. I was checking a stretch of fence near the creek, making sure winter hadn't rotted posts when a high-pitched whine cut through the sound of wind and water. Not a bug, not a bird. Something artificial. I looked up. A black quadcopter hovered just above tree-height lens pointed straight at me. It didn't drift like a hobby toy. It held position, climbing and dipping in little calculated moves, like it was taking measurements. Nice day to trespass, I muttered. It zipped away toward Sunny Hollow's brand-new roofs. The second drone came lower. The third one skimmed the workshop roofline so close, Banjo tried to jump for it, teeth snapping at thin air. Then came the sedan, white, windows tinted dark enough to make it more shadow than car. It appeared one morning at the far edge of the HOA line and just sat there. No engine hum, no door opening, nothing. When I finally started walking that way, it rolled off calmly, like it wasn't done just postponing. And my mailbox. One afternoon I found the lid half open, hinge still warm. One letter nudged out like someone had started to pull it, then changed their mind. Nothing stolen, just rearranged, just touched. They weren't damaging anything yet. They were letting me know they could. The next phase stepped right over the line. Literally. I was tightening a hinge on the south pasture gate when I heard footsteps behind me. Not sneaking, not running, Just two men walking on my grass like they had an appointment. I turned. Two guys in safety vests and hard hats stood a good 6 feet inside my boundary. The older one had a rough beard and a clipboard he seemed real proud of. The younger one had wide, nervous eyes that flicked between me and the cast iron marker my dad had sunk into the ground decades ago. "Can I help you boys?" I asked. No sugar in my tone. "Survey crew," the older one said. "Just checking erosion and drainage. Community improvements." He gestured with his clipboard like it was a badge. "Then you know you just crossed my line," I said. He glanced at the marker, then at his paper. "Maps say otherwise." The young guy shifted. "Mark, this is over the line." They told us. Mark cut him off with a look. "New plats override old stakes." He dropped his measuring wheel and started walking a grid pattern, dragging it across my grass. The counter clicked with every foot he took. Click, 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 claim, claim, claim. "You can walk back to your side," I said. "Or you can leave with a trespass report attached to your fancy clipboard." Mark smirked, but there was a twitch there. "We're just following orders," he said. From who, he didn't answer. He just kept walking, planting little pink flags without permission. The younger worker hesitated at each one, like those thin pieces of plastic weighed 50 pounds. As soon as they were gone, I pulled the flags and checked my cameras. One feed from the workshop had gone black for exactly 2 minutes while they were on the property. Not a second more, not a second less. Someone had tested my blind spots. I fixed that night. Extra units, backup power, invisible housings. If they wanted a map of my land, they'd get one, but it would be my map, not theirs. Then the damage started. The first warning came out of my faucet. I turned the handle one morning, expecting the same cold well water I'd tasted my whole life. What came out looked like someone had mixed in river bottom. Brown, cloudy, smelled wrong. I went straight to the pump. Banjo got there first. He circled the casing nose low, whining. When I knelt beside him, I smelled it too diesel. Faint but there. Not a spill. Not enough to foul everything. Just enough to tell me fingers had been where they shouldn't. That same evening, a new light hit my land. One of the HOA houses had installed a bright security spotlight. Nothing wrong with the light, except this one wasn't aimed at their driveway. It was aimed straight across the boundary, pouring white glare over my fields like a prison tower. When it kicked on at dusk, half my pasture glowed like a stage. Bootprints appeared near my porch one night, fresh ones in soft dirt, leading right up to the bottom step, then turning away. No knock, no note, just a path and a decision not to take that last step. Banjo stopped sleeping in my room after that. He parked himself in the hall, nose toward the door, ears twitching at invisible things moving outside. The fear that settled in wasn't the panicked kind. It was quieter, colder, the kind that sits at the base of your spine and asks, how far are they willing to go? When the deputy finally came, it felt less like help and more like a test. By the time I called, flags were planted deep on my side, machinery tracks were cut into my soil, and the HOA Facebook page had a post about upcoming improvements to common land. Common land. That's what they'd started calling my 12 acres. Deputy Wilkins pulled up alone, young, shirt still stiff like it hadn't been washed enough times yet. He walked the edge of the trench in progress while Karen waited for her cue. Started seeing equipment when he asked. Before sunrise, I said, trench is on 3 sides. They're 1 pass away from closing my road completely. Karen stepped in right on time, laminated papers in hand. Deputy, we've already cleared this with zoning. Updated plats, all within Sunny Hollow's jurisdiction. She handed him a sheet shiny enough to blind you. The new lines cut right through my land like someone had taken scissors to reality. I pointed at the old cast iron marker. That post's been in the ground since '78. Everything on this side is mine. Wilkins frowned at the metal, then at the glossy map, then at the machines idling behind us. I can't adjudicate boundary disputes, he said finally. That has to go through civil channels. Unless there's immediate danger to life, my hands are tied. A backhoe bucket swung a little too close to the well line. Dirt crumbled. Banjo barked once sharp. No danger, I asked. Wilkins winced. Look, I'll write this up. My advice, document everything. Photos, videos, timestamps, talk to an attorney. Karen's lips curled in the smallest of smiles. Wilkins couldn't see it. I could. He left me with a case number and a hollow sense that the law, at least for the moment, was watching from the sidelines. Fine. If they wanted documentation, I'd give them more than they knew what to do with. The day the email arrived, the whole game changed. I was at my desk watching camera feeds when a new notification popped up in the corner of the screen. Unknown address. Subject line, you didn't hear this from me. I opened it. One photo. A blueprint laid out on the tailgate of a truck. I zoomed in until the lines blurred. Title block at the top, Sunny Hollow, Phase 3 expansion. My stomach tightened. There, in careful architect ink, were rows of houses, layered over my land. My house was labeled Future Recreation Overlay. My barn and workshop were shaded as Clearing Zone. The well had a note next to it, Existing Utility, Remove. Another picture sat below it, a corkboard with a handwritten note pinned dead center, Property Acquisition Target. Stop negotiating. Begin pressure sequence. KM. The mouse felt heavy in my hand. Another email came in before I could breathe. Same sender. They're not doing drainage. They're trying to make the place unlivable. Don't let them box you in. I can't send more from work. They watch everything. I scraped back through weeks of footage until I found the young survey worker. The guilty eyes. The way he'd snapped photos of the illegal stakes when Mark wasn't looking. He was my ghost in their machine. They wanted this land empty, dangerous, declared unfit so a line in a statute somewhere could be twisted into giving it to them. They weren't just trying to get me to sign. They were trying to make staying impossible. That night the air felt wrong before anything happened. Oklahoma nights are usually noisy crickets, coyotes whined hissing through grass. At 2, 4, 3 it all felt dead. Banjo woke up first, rigid by the window, chest-pumping teeth just barely bared. I moved beside him and pulled the curtain back a sliver. 2 men in dark jackets moved along the southern cut of the trench, cinder blocks in their hands. They dropped them into the narrow gap I'd left earlier that day, the only passage wide enough to haul in water or get a truck through in an emergency. Beside them, coat pulled tight against the chill, stood Karen. No clipboard now, no sunglasses, just crossed arms and a look of satisfaction. Make sure this section is solid, she said. If his foundation cracks or the pump line collapses, insurance will handle the mess. My thumb hit the record icon before I even realized I'd moved. Not harassment, not a misunderstanding, not a petty property squabble. That sentence turned everything. I slipped on my jacket, opened the gun, safe, and pulled out my father's 12-gauge. The metal was familiar weight-balanced barrel angled safely down. I loaded it, engaged the safety, and slung it over my shoulder. Not to wave it around, not to show off. Just to carry the same way he taught me, you bring a tool because you hope you never have to use it. When I stepped onto the porch, Banjo pressed at my side ears forward. The cinder blocks kept dropping into the trench. Thud, 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 each one sealing me in a little tighter. Evening, I called. My voice carried clean across the cut. One of the workers spun, almost losing his grip on the block. The flashlight in his partner's hand swung straight into my face, then down to the shotgun on my shoulder. "What do you think you're doing?" the bigger one barked. "Standing on my land," I said. "What are you doing? We're securing a hazard zone," he snapped, "for community safety." Karen stepped between us like she could physically block the truth. "Put the weapon down, Evan," she said. "You're threatening my team." I didn't move. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm reminding you of where you're standing." I lifted my phone just enough for the screen glow to catch her face. She saw the red recording light. Her jaw tightened. "The sheriff will see this," I said calmly. "Every second of it." The younger worker set his block down like it might explode. "Karen," he whispered, "this isn't legal. I'm done." "Get back to work," she hissed without looking at him. He didn't. He walked to the truck, climbed in, and drove off gravel, spitting behind him. The bigger security guy shifted his weight. He wasn't nearly as sure now. "You can't intimidate us," Karen spat. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I stepped closer to the edge of the trench, still on my side, still calm. I tapped the phone screen, turned up the volume, and played her own voice back at her. "If his foundation cracks or the pump line collapses, insurance will handle the mess." The words hung there in the night like a confession. Her face went pale. "That's out of context," she snapped. "The sheriff can provide context," I replied. Silence stretched. The security men backed away first. Karen held her ground 2 seconds longer, then spun on her heel and stalked to her SUV. She drove off without another word. The blocks they'd already dropped stayed in the trench evidence. Now, not progress. Banjo leaned into my leg. The night felt different, not safe yet, but shifted. They'd wanted to bury me. Instead, they'd given me the shovel with their fingerprints all over it. By morning, I wasn't asking for a deputy. I was asking for the sheriff. Sheriff Hank Wright pulled up just after 9. Old boots gray in his beard eyes that looked like they'd seen every bad idea a county could produce. He stepped out of his cruiser, took one long look at the half-sealed trench encircling my land, and didn't waste breath pretending this was normal. "Walk me through it," he said. Inside, I sat him in front of the monitor, feeding all 12 hidden cameras. Banjo settled by the door, watching him like he was deciding whether this man could be trusted with our weathered anger. I didn't go looking for a fight, I said. I just kept the cameras running. Good, Wright replied. Let's see it. We watched. Trespass. Flags. Machinery tracked across my side. The dump truck blocking the drive. The spotlight pinning my land in white. Someone at the well casing. The email screenshots. The blueprint. The corkboard note. Then the trench at 2:43 a.m. Her voice. Make sure this section is solid. If his foundation cracks or the pump line collapses, insurance will handle the mess. Wright's jaw clenched once. That was his only reaction. When the clip ended, he sat back, eyes still on the now dark screen. This isn't a property dispute, he said. This is criminal. He listed it out like charges on a ledger. Criminal trespass, tampering with critical infrastructure, harassment, coercion, and that trench blocking your only exit, he paused. That's unlawful imprisonment. He took the flash drive I'd prepped and slid it into an evidence bag. Stay put, he said. We're going to talk to your neighbors. He didn't mean the good ones. 2 more cruisers rolled in 10 minutes later. Deputies climbed out, squared their shoulders, and followed Wright across the boundary into Sunny Hollow. I stayed on my porch. Banjo did too. We watched from our side as they walked straight to the HOA office. I couldn't hear the words, but body language doesn't lie. Karen opened the door with that same HOA smile. She spoke. Wright showed her the tablet, pressed play. Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. She reached for something, papers, excuses, a story she'd rehearsed for this moment. Whatever it was, it didn't hold. One of her own board members took a half step back from her like he'd just seen the real version of the person he'd been following. When the deputies turned her around and cuffed her wrists, there wasn't any dramatic speech. Wright read the charges clear and steady, with the sun on his shoulders and her subdivision behind him. They walked her past a line of neighbors in athleisure and lawn care shoes. Some filmed, some stared at their own driveways, like if they didn't see it, it wasn't happening. For the first time since the engine started grinding at my soil, the land around me felt like it was on my side again. The siege had broken. Now there was only cleanup. The county trucks came back that afternoon. Not HOA rentals with vinyl logos, real county rigs with worn paint and honest dents. The crew chief walked up, shook my hand like he meant it, and said, "Heard they made a mess. We're here to fix it." They started at the driveway. Cinder blocks were pulled, stacked, cataloged. The dump truck that had once sat sideways across my only exit was hauled out and impounded. Then they turned to the trench. Dozer blades pushed dirt back where it belonged, layer by layer. Compactors followed, packing the earth tight. They worked methodically, respectful of the well line, careful around the roots of the cottonwoods. No one joked. No one cut corners. Neighbors gathered at the HOA fence. Without Karen, they didn't cluster in tight, judgmental knots anymore. They stood separately, shoulders bent like people who just realized the thing they signed up for had turned into something uglier than they'd admitted. An older woman in a faded sweatshirt approached the boundary and lifted a hand in a half wave. "I'm sorry," she called softly. "We should have asked more questions." I gave her a nod. It was all I had at that moment. By early evening, the trench was gone. The earth looked different, lighter, like a scar that had started to heal. You could still see where it had been if you knew what to look for. The color of the backfilled soil, the slight change in grade, but the gaping wound circling my home was closed. The crew chief signed off on a form, handed me a copy, and said county's freezing all HOA construction until the DA's done with them. You've got support now. When the last truck pulled out, the quiet that settled over the place finally felt like the right kind again. Wind in the leaves, a bird on the fence. No engines, no bright white interrogation light cutting across my field. I grabbed my post-hole digger and cedar boards. It was time to put something of mine back into the ground. Banjo followed tail up, nose full of clean dirt and tractor exhaust that meant repair, not attack. On the western edge where the trench had cut deepest, I measured out a straight line and started digging new holes. Each post went in deeper than the last fence had locked in with concrete. I mixed myself in an old wheelbarrow. Sweat ran down my back, but it felt good, honest. By the time I set the last panel, the sky was sliding into late afternoon gold. The fence stood 10 feet tall, solid as a statement. Not a wall to hide behind. A marker. A line that said, "This is mine." I pulled a small metal sign from my pocket. Black letters etched into brushed steel. Trench. 25. Never. Again. 25 for the year. For the incident report for the night. They tried to turn my home into a moat, and my life into a zoning footnote. I bolted it to the center panel, stepped back, and let the weight of everything settle where it belonged, out of my chest and into the ground under my boots. Banjo sat beside me, tongue lolling, finally relaxed. The light caught his fur, and the new fence in the same warm stroke. The land was quiet, but not empty. It held my father's lessons, the scars of what they'd tried, and the proof they couldn't erase that one stubborn man with a dog and a dozen hidden cameras had been enough to stop a machine that thought it could carve him out like a bad line on a map. They'd tried to bury me. All they managed to bury was themselves.